Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli here. Welcome to a brand new In the Shop, and we've got a timely one for you today. And we're approaching the fall period, right? The nights are getting cold, the water temperature's going down. We're getting into that fall period, no matter where you live. And when you get into that fall period, you've heard me say it before, bait is the most important thing. Bass are focused on bait. They're going to feed up before the approaching winter. And when this fall bite kicks in, there's no better bait than a spinnerbait to catch bass. There's no better bait in the fall than a spinnerbait to catch bass, right? It's got flash, vibration, looks like a school of little minnows or shad or alewife or herring. It's a great bait imitator. But I'm here today to talk to you about my favorite fall spinnerbait bite called burning a spinnerbait. Burning a spinnerbait. And we're going to talk about the bait. We're going to talk about a few modifications you have to make to this bait. And then after we're done talking about the bait and the modifications, I'm going to get into the rod, the reel, the line, and the retrieve a little bit. And we're really going to thoroughly cover this technique, so good in the fall, year-round, but in the fall, it rocks, called burning a spinnerbait, okay? First thing, let's talk about the spinnerbait, the kind of spinnerbaits we want for this burning technique. And number one rule is we're going to go with a heavier, full-bodied spinnerbait. Okay, so not a little tiny spinnerbait, not a giant oversized spinnerbait, just a regular full-size spinnerbait. But the key to this burning technique is a heavier spinnerbait. Okay, so this is one of my favorite full-size spinnerbaits. It's by Mullix. And it's the Venator spinnerbait. They make it in a lot of different sizes. But for this burning technique, listen to me, you ready? 1/2 ounce, 5/8, which is my favorite size, really interesting size, 3/4 ounce, all the way up to a 1 ounce spinnerbait, right? So for this burning technique, no quarters, no 3/16, no 3/8. Leave them lighter spinnerbaits, leave them at home. For the burning technique, 1/2 ounce, 5/8, 3/4, even 1 ounce, okay? I'm going to tell you why that's important in a second. So, big full-bodied spinnerbait, heavier spinnerbait, and on colors, man, you know my rule on colors. I want you to match the hatch, right? Pick a color that mimics the forage in that lake. So is it perch and bluegill? Is it golden shiner? Is it shad and alewife, right? Think about the forage when you're selecting color. But we want that big, more full-bodied spinnerbait because we're going to be burning it, okay? And especially the weight. Talk about that 5/8 and 3/4 ounce spinnerbait. That's a heavy spinnerbait, but it's going to be key to how we're going to retrieve that lure. Okay, so we're going to use a 5/8 here as an example. And this is a great color. This is a color that I designed. It's called Boogaloo Dace. It's a great color that imitates a lot of different forage, a lot of different bait style forage. And this is what it looks like out of the pack, 5/8. And if you look at the blade combination, we've got a real little tiny blade. Look at that thing right there. You see that thing? Look how little that blade is. That's like, man, I don't know. I want to say that's probably like a number, it's probably like a little number 1 or a number 2 size willow on there, real small, okay? And then we look at our lead blade. And this back blade is the blade that I call the lead blade. And that's about a size 4.5. On a 3/4, that lead blade is a 5. And on a 1 ounce, that lead blade is a 5.5 or a 6 on some spinnerbaits. Super big, right? So little blade, bigger lead blade. And in this burning technique, we want to change that lead blade. You ready for this? Listen to me. This is key to this burning technique. And we want to put on at least one size smaller blade. Okay? Right? So look at that size of that blade. And that right there is a 4.5. And right here is a 3.5. Look at the difference in sizes of those blades. It's pretty substantial. That's one size down. Okay? So I want you to, whatever spinnerbait you pick, remember, heavier spinnerbaits, 1/2, 5/8, 3/4, 1 ounce, whatever blade that comes with out of the pack, I want you to go one size down, at least one size down. Okay, so 4.5, 3.5, and by the way, these blades, you can get them anywhere. You can get them at Tackle Warehouse. They sell them separate. Lure parts companies, lure supplies companies, you can get them. And of course, you could always take them off smaller spinnerbaits. But we are going to replace that lead blade, and we're going to go one full size down, okay? And real easy to do. You can change just the blade, or you can change the whole assembly out. On this one, we're just going to change this whole assembly, and I like to get that started. I'll push it off the split ring. I'll put the new one on, and I'll just spin the old one off, right? Show this to you in a second once I get it off. Okay, there it goes. We have that smaller one on there. We spun that 4.5 off, that bigger blade. I'm going to put that in my blade box. We're going to save that for later. But now, I want you to look at this. You ready? Heavy, full-bodied spinnerbait. This is the 5/8. Had that little tiny blade in the front, but our lead blade, our back blade, we replaced it with one full-sized smaller blade, okay? So now we got that little number 1 or number 2, and now we have a 3.5 on there, a 3.5 instead of that big 4.5. So this is really important in the burning technique, okay? I'm going to tell you why in a second. The next modification I want to do is I want to actually thin out that skirt. And when I'm burning this bait, I do 2 things to thin this skirt out. The first thing is length. That's what it looks like coming out of the pack. And you see it, and that skirt is about 1 inch, on some spinnerbaits even 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches below the bend of the hook. I want to get my scissors and I want to cut that skirt material so it's just below the hook. Like literally, I use my scissors and I want to feel the bottom of that hook, okay? So now I've thinned out the length. The next thing I want to do is I want to thin out the thickness of this skirt. There's no science to this, guys. I literally just take and I'm going to pull out, I like to call it 20%, right? So you can guess. I like to do it so it's not thin in one area. I go all around the spinnerbait and I just start pulling out material. And I'd like to do it all around 360 so that it's an even thinning, okay? 20%, just guess it, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so now look what I did. I cut the length of the skirt. I pulled material out about 20%. And now I'm going to tell you why we've done all that stuff. In this burning technique, we want this spinnerbait to stay really high in the water column, but we don't want the spinnerbait to burn out of the water, to bulge out of the water. So we need a heavy bait with small blades, right? Think about that theory. We want that heavy bait. We want a half, we want a 5/8, a 3/4, or 1 ounce. But if we have a big blade on there, right? Look at the size of that blade. The bigger the blade, the more lift it has. The smaller the blade, the less lift it has. So by using a big, heavy spinnerbait, replacing the blades to be small blades, cutting that skirt, thinning that skirt out, think of what we're going to do. Now we've got a spinnerbait that will stay under. When we reel it fast, and we're going to look at that in a second, when we reel it super fast, it's not going to bulge out of the water. It's not going to want to lift out of the water. It's going to want to stay down, below the surface, just under the water. And that's the perfect spinnerbait, right? Two last things before we get to the technique on this thing. The one is always, not 9 times out of 10, not 8 times out of 10, always, when I'm burning a spinnerbait, I don't use a trailer, okay? An actual plastic trailer. A lot of guys will use some kind of trailer on the back. I don't use a trailer because a trailer adds bulk and adds lift. Remember, we don't want it blowing out of the top. So no trailer, but 100% of the time, I add a trailer hook. When you're burning in the fall, a lot of these fish are aggressive, but they headbutt it, so you always want a trailer hook, okay? I use a 1/0 or a 2/0. This is a VMC trailer hook. Comes with a little piece of surgical tubing. I add that on there to help keep that trailer hook in place. And that's going to catch a lot of fish that are short striking or headbutting this bait, because you're going to be reeling it fast. The other thing I wanted to mention is blade style. And for this burning technique, we always want that lead blade to be a willow. Always, okay? Because a Colorado blade, that round blade, I wanted to see if I have one here, I don't think I do. That round blade is cupped, and a deep, round Colorado blade wants to lift. But an elongated willow blade does not want to lift. So my 2 favorite styles, I love the double willow. There are times when I'll throw a single willow or even a tandem, because that little Colorado is so small, it's okay. But that lead blade, I want you to always have a willow blade, okay? Real quick recap. You ready for this? Heavy spinnerbait, full-bodied spinnerbait, half, 5/8, 3/4, 1 ounce. Go 1 size down, replace that lead blade, thin your skirt out, trim the length, and add a trailer hook. You've got the perfect fall burning spinnerbait, okay? I want to get to real quick the rod and the reel, and then we'll talk about how we're going to use it. First thing on rod and reel is I want you to use a rod that's not too stiff. That's the main thing I want you to think about. I prefer a 7-foot to a 7.4, 7.4, 7.5 medium action rod. This is my favorite by far all-around spinnerbait rod. It's a 7-foot medium Abu Garcia Ike Series rod. Go down in action. You don't want a medium heavy. You don't want a heavy. You surely don't want an extra heavy. A medium action rod, okay? And the reason for that is, although it's got a single hook, when that fish hits it, you want to let him get it before you drive the hook home, right? You want just a little bit of delay. So a medium action rod, but the most critical thing when you're burning a spinnerbait in the fall, listen to me, you ready? Is your gear ratio of that reel. And for this technique, you have to use a fast gear ratio reel. At a minimum, you want to be in the 7s, right? 7.3 to 1, 7.5 to 1. But I prefer a high-speed reel that's 8.0 to 1 or higher. Abu Garcia Revo Ike is 8.0 to 1. This is an Abu MGX Extreme that's 8 to 1. Abu even has a Revo Rocket that's in the 9s. You need that fast retrieve to keep that lure on the top, okay? Medium action rod, 7 to 7.4, high speed reel, 8 to 0 to 1, 8 to 1, something in that range is the deal. And last but not least, you ready for this, guys? Fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon, because once again, think about what we're trying to do burning a spinnerbait. We want a bait that's heavy, but we want a bait that stays under the water. So the problem with braid and mono, right? What's wrong with braid and mono? Braid and mono float. They're buoyant. We don't want a buoyant line when we're burning a spinnerbait in the fall. We want a dense line. We want to keep the spinnerbait under the water, not bulging out. So because of that, fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon's dense, it's heavy. It's going to help keep that spinnerbait down. I really prefer anywhere between 12 and 20 pound fluorocarbon. This is Berkeley Trilene, 100% fluorocarbon. But that 14, 15 pound to 17 pound is really the deal. And 15 pound fluorocarbon in most situations is the perfect line for burning a spinnerbait. All right, let me tie this thing on here real quick. And we'll just, I want to go over this technique of burning. And the great thing about burning a spinnerbait in the fall is it's not a difficult technique, okay? All right, got the thing on there. All right, there we go. We got our this is a 5/8. We went down a full size, right? We thinned the skirt out, we got the trailer hook out. And what we want to do with this spinnerbait is we want to burn it and retrieve it so that it's anywhere from just under the surface, literally almost making the blades wake, to maybe a foot or two below the surface. We want to keep it in the top of that water column, because when we're burning it, the whole thought is to have that fish look up and say, there's a bait fish trying to get away from me. I got to eat it. And we're burning it because we don't want that fish to get a good look at it, right? If we're in clean or stained water in the fall and we're just barely reeling this, that fish has time to look at it, inspect it, say, something's not right about that. But if that spinnerbait goes over his head, he's looking up in that stained and clean water, and just, it's moving so fast and these blades are turning so rapidly and there's flash and vibration, we're making that fish react. That's the whole key to this burning, is making him react, making him not have time to think about it, right? He looks up, it looks real, it sounds cool. That's what we want. So in burning, we're going to make a super long cast out there, and when that spinnerbait hits the water, we are going to keep our rod tip high, okay? If you look at a clock, if you're looking at your watch, we want to keep that rod tip at about 1 or 2 o'clock, right? We don't want it at 12 because we want a little room to be able to set that hook. But we don't want it at 3 or 4 either, right? We're going to keep our rod tip at 1, 2 o'clock. We're going to keep it at that angle. And by keeping our rod tip up and high, we're creating more lift. We're keeping it high, but we're not letting it blow out of the top. The spinnerbait's heavy, the blades are small, we got fluorocarbon, it's going to stay down, but we want to keep it near the top. And then it's called burning, so we're going to burn away, baby. We're going to burn away. The one thing I want you to do, though, when you burn it, I never, ever just burn it back steady. As you burn that spinnerbait back, throw pauses in, or just a tiny little twitch with your rod. And every time you pause or twitch, that steady rhythm of that spinnerbait just burning over his head, when you pause it or twitch it, it'll just change direction, and it'll make those blades kick off and flash. It'll stop that vibration just for a second. And those little pauses or twitches in that burning retrieve really help to cue the bite. That's a lot of times the final trigger to making that bass bite that spinnerbait. So you know, burning from a standpoint of how to fish it, really easy, right? Rod high, 1 or 2 o'clock, burning it, throw a pause or a twitch in, all the way back to your rod tip, next cast. You can cover a tremendous amount of water. You're going to create a reaction strike. And in the fall, when the water's cooling off, no better bait to imitate a little school bait fish than a spinnerbait. All right? I hope you like that one, man. I cannot wait to get out and throw this bait. I cannot wait to go burn a spinnerbait in the next couple weeks here. We're right at the fall period up here in the Northeast. I'll have that 5/8 mullet spinnerbait, venator spinnerbait tied on, one size down, thinned out skirt, trailer hook. I'm going to have that tied on, and I'm going to catch a lot of big fish using this burning technique. I hope you enjoyed this in the shop, man. I love talking about this one. If you like what you see, if you like these in the shops, do me a favor. See that little subscribe button down there? See it? Ding, 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 ding. Hit that subscribe button. Become a subscriber to this channel. We're going to have great educational content coming to you every single week. If you're already subscribed to Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube, do me a favor. Tell your buddy, tell your cousin, tell your friend. Tell them about this channel. And we're going to try to help them learn a couple new things about bass fishing. Have a great one. Good fall fishing. Tie on a spinnerbait and burn it. You're going to get your arm ripped off. Bye.